It was just another Monday morning. The city was already wide awake, with people rushing through the streets, cars honking, and the smell of roasted coffee beans floating through the air. A man named Ryan walked quickly down the street, his tie slightly crooked and his laptop bag bumping against his side. He was running late for a presentation, something that had become far too common for him lately. He worked for a small marketing firm that shared a street with some of the city's biggest companies. Every morning he stopped by a cafe called Morning Brew, a small corner place known for its warm lighting and friendly staff. It wasn't fancy, but it had something comforting about it. The smell of fresh pastries, the hum of soft music, and the familiar faces that passed through. Ryan entered the cafe, slightly out of breath. The place was busy as usual, with people lining up for their morning caffeine. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes for his meeting while inching forward in line. He didn't notice the woman sitting by the window at first. She looked like she belonged in another world, calm, elegant, and completely composed. Her black coat was draped over the chair, a sleek laptop open in front of her, and a cup of cappuccino sat untouched beside it. She wasn't scrolling or typing, just staring outside at the passing crowd. There was something about her, maybe the quiet confidence in her posture or the faint sadness in her eyes, that made her stand out. When the barista called Ryan's name, he stepped forward quickly to grab his cup. At that same moment, another customer brushed past the woman's table, knocking her coffee cup over. The cup tipped, spilling across her documents. "Oh, I'm so sorry," the stranger stammered, but quickly rushed off, embarrassed. Ryan instinctively walked over, grabbing some napkins from the counter. "Here, let me help," he said, kneeling beside her table. The woman looked up, startled for a moment, then smiled softly. "Thank you. That was very kind. No problem. Mondays, right?" Ryan joked, trying to lighten the moment. "Seems like they never go easy on anyone." That made her laugh, a quiet, genuine laugh that seemed to soften her whole face. "You're right about that," she said. "It's already been a long morning." He helped her dry off the papers, noticing the company logo printed on them, a large firm he recognized instantly. "Oh, you work for Sterling Group?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Something like that," she said, not giving away more. Ryan didn't think much of it. He stood, gave her one more napkin, and said, "Well, I hope your day gets better. Maybe get another coffee. On me, if it helps balance the Monday curse." She chuckled. "I might take you up on that." He smiled, nodded politely, and walked out of the cafe. He didn't turn back. He was already thinking about his presentation and how much trouble he'd be in if he was late again. But as he left, the woman by the window kept watching the door he'd just exited through. She took a slow sip of her new coffee and smiled to herself. It wasn't often someone spoke to her like that, without nerves or calculation. Her name was Elena, and she was not just an employee of Sterling Group. She was its CEO. She had built the company from the ground up, leading it through years of challenges and growth. People around her admired her drive and discipline. They called her sharp, fearless, and decisive, but few knew how lonely that kind of power could feel. The higher she climbed, the fewer people seemed to speak to her like a person. Everyone treated her like a symbol, a leader, a name, a boss. But that stranger in the cafe, he hadn't treated her like any of those things. He just treated her like another human being having a bad day. That moment stayed with her longer than she expected. For the rest of the day, Elena sat through back-to-back meetings, but her mind kept drifting back to the cafe. She remembered his kind eyes, the easy humor in his voice, and how he didn't seem to know who she was, or didn't care. Meanwhile, Ryan's day spiraled into chaos. His presentation was rushed, his boss was stressed, and by the end of the day he felt like he had been hit by a storm of deadlines. But in the quiet moment between meetings, he found himself thinking back to the cafe too. Something about that woman had stuck with him. There was calmness in her voice that made him pause, a quiet strength that he couldn't quite explain. Days passed. The memory began to fade into the blur of everyday life. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. A week later, Ryan's boss called him into the office. "We just landed a potential partnership," he said. "Big client, Sterling Group. I want you to help prepare the pitch deck. You'll be delivering it personally next Monday." Ryan blinked. Sterling Group? The same name he saw on those coffee-stained documents? He shrugged it off. It couldn't be the same person. The next Monday arrived. Ryan ironed his best shirt, polished his shoes, and tried to calm his nerves. This was the biggest meeting of his career. He arrived at the Sterling Group's glass building downtown, a towering structure that seemed to touch the clouds. The lobby gleamed, filled with expensive art and the quiet echo of professional footsteps. He checked in with reception and was escorted to a large conference room. He rehearsed his lines under his breath, trying to hide his shaking hands. Then the door opened, and she walked in. The same woman from the cafe. The one he had helped with the spilled coffee. Only this time, she wasn't the woman sitting quietly by the window. She was the woman at the head of the table. Confident, commanding. Everyone in the room stood as she entered. Ryan froze for a split second, his mind racing. She looked different in her element, her hair tied neatly, her expression focused. But when her eyes met his, recognition flickered instantly. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Well," she said lightly, "fancy seeing you here." Ryan tried to hide his surprise. "I didn't realize you were, well, you." The room filled with polite laughter and the tension eased. The meeting began, but the air between them felt different. A strange mix of familiarity and curiosity. Ryan delivered his pitch with more confidence than he expected. Maybe it was because she was there, or maybe because he wanted to prove himself. Whatever it was, the room responded well. When he finished, Elena nodded approvingly. "Impressive," she said. "I'd like to discuss this further, perhaps over coffee?" He almost laughed at the coincidence. "Coffee sounds great," he said, trying not to smile too much. Later, as they sat in her private office, the mood shifted. The conversation drifted from work to life, the challenges of leadership, the pressure of expectations, and the strange balance between ambition and happiness. She spoke with honesty, something she rarely allowed herself. Ryan listened more than he talked, offering quiet thoughts that made her laugh again. She noticed how he never tried to flatter her, never acted intimidated. He treated her just like he did in the cafe, with warmth and sincerity. When the meeting ended, she walked him to the elevator herself, something she rarely did for business guests. "Thank you for today," he said. "For the second coffee," she smiled. "Maybe next time it's my turn to spill something," he chuckled. "I'll bring extra napkins just in case." As the elevator doors closed, Ryan couldn't help smiling. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew something about this connection felt different. It wasn't about business anymore. Elena stood there for a moment after he left, staring at the empty hallway. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something real. Something that started with a simple cup of coffee. That night, both of them went home with the same quiet thought. For years, their lives had been about goals, meetings, and responsibilities. But for the first time in a long while, they were both thinking about something that had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with possibility. Neither of them knew where this story was heading. But deep down, they both felt that something had just begun, something worth waiting for. A week had passed since that unexpected meeting at Sterling Group. Ryan had gone back to his small office, still thinking about how strange life could be. Just a few days ago, he had spilled napkins for a woman at a cafe. Now that same woman turned out to be one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. He didn't tell anyone about their connection. He didn't even know if it meant anything. Maybe she'd already forgotten him. Maybe that meeting was just business. But some part of him couldn't let it go. There was something about her that stayed in his thoughts. He tried to focus on work, but every time he passed the cafe, he slowed down a little, half expecting to see her sitting by the window again. She never was. Still, he stopped there every morning out of habit, or maybe hope. Then one Friday morning, he got an email from Sterling Group. It was an invitation to a follow-up meeting. His company's proposal had made it to the final stage, and they wanted to discuss further details with the CEO herself. Ryan read the message twice before it truly sank in. He smiled without realizing it. He was nervous, of course, but also excited. When the day came, he arrived at the building early. The air smelled faintly of polished floors and new paper. He took a deep breath before entering the conference room. A few minutes later, The door opened and she walked in. Elena. The same calm presence, the same confidence, but this time, her expression softened when she saw him. "Good morning," she said, her tone warm. "You're early?" He smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, I figured it's better to be early than to make an entrance." That made her laugh lightly. A smart choice. The meeting began. Other managers joined. Discussions filled the room, but every now and then she'd glance at him when he spoke. He noticed it. Those brief, thoughtful looks that said more than words. After 2 hours, the meeting ended and everyone began packing up. As Ryan gathered his papers, she said, "Would you mind staying for a few minutes? I'd like to go over something privately." He hesitated, then nodded. When the room cleared, she walked over to the window. The city stretched out behind her. Tall buildings, moving cars, a blur of life below. "I wanted to thank you," she said finally, turning toward him. "Your presentation was excellent. You explained things simply without all the usual jargon. That's rare." "Thank you," he said, unsure what to do with his hands. "I just try to make sense, that's all." She smiled. "You do more than that. You make things feel clear. It's refreshing." There was a small pause, not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then she added softly, "Would you like some coffee? My assistant can bring us some." Ryan almost laughed. "Coffee seems to keep finding its way into our story." She tilted her head, amused. "Maybe it's fate's way of keeping us caffeinated." A few minutes later, 2 cups of coffee arrived. They sat across from each other, and the air between them felt different from before. Less formal. More open. He told her a bit about his work, how he ended up in marketing, how he loved finding creative ways to tell stories through brands. She listened intently, not out of politeness, but with real curiosity. Then she shared her own story. How she had started Sterling Group with only 4 people in a small rented office. How she'd spent years proving herself in a world that rarely gave women in business any room to fail. She didn't sound proud or boastful, just honest. Her voice softened when she spoke about the nights she'd slept at her desk and the days when her only meal was coffee and crackers. Ryan listened, quietly moved. "That's incredible," he said. "I mean, I've read stories about CEOs working hard, but hearing it from you, it feels real. You didn't just build a company, you built a life out of determination." She looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, "Sometimes determination can be lonely." He didn't know how to respond at first. He could see it in her eyes, that quiet loneliness that success couldn't fix. "Maybe," he said softly. "That's why the world gives us coffee shops. So we can bump into strangers who make us laugh at the right time." Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "You really believe in small moments, don't you?" "I think they're the only ones that matter," he said. That conversation lingered long after the meeting ended. When he left her office, he carried a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling that something meaningful had started. Even if he didn't fully understand what it was, Elena, on the other hand, sat in her office long after he left, staring at her coffee cup. It had been years since she'd enjoyed a simple conversation that wasn't about numbers, deadlines, or profits. This felt different, lighter, more human. Over the next few weeks, they exchanged more emails, then short calls, and eventually more meetings. Each one grew slightly less formal. Sometimes they'd discuss business. Other times they'd talk about books, travel, or random things that made them laugh. It became a quiet pattern, one they both secretly looked forward to. One afternoon, Ryan visited her office to deliver a revised proposal. It had been a long day for her, full of negotiations and impatient investors. When he entered, she looked exhausted. "Rough day?" he asked gently. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "You could say that. Some days I wonder why I ever signed up for all this." He placed the papers on her desk and smiled. "Because you're good at it. Because you make things happen. And because if you didn't, half the city would probably fall apart." That made her laugh. A tired but genuine laugh. "That's a dangerous amount of faith in one person." "Well," he said, "someone has to believe in you." That silence returned again. That quiet space where neither of them had to say much. After a moment, she said softly, "It's strange. People around me talk all day, but very few actually make me feel heard." Ryan hesitated, then said, "Maybe that's because they don't listen to you. They listen to your title." Her expression changed. "You're right," she said, almost to herself. "And you're the first person who's ever said that out loud." He smiled faintly. "I just call it like I see it." Later that evening, when the sky turned orange outside her window, she asked if he had time for a walk before heading home. They walked quietly down the street, the noise of the city buzzing around them. It was one of those moments when words didn't need to fill the air. They talked about small things, music, favorite places, old memories. But beneath those words was a growing sense of connection neither could ignore. At a corner cafe, they stopped for coffee again. It had become their unspoken tradition. Elena looked at him across the small table. "You know," she said, "it's been a long time since I talked to someone like this." "Like what?" he asked. "Without worrying what they want from me." He met her eyes. "Not everyone wants something." Her voice softened. "You don't?" He shook his head. "I just like good coffee and good company." She looked down, smiling quietly. For someone who was used to people treating her with calculated politeness, that simple sentence meant more than he could imagine. They sat there as the city lights came on outside, watching people pass by. Two souls caught between the noise of the world and the calm of something unspoken. When they finally stood to leave, she said, "Thank you for this." "For what?" "For reminding me that life isn't just about work." He smiled. "Any time." That night as Ryan walked home, he felt lighter. He didn't know what was happening between them, but he knew it was real, not some fantasy or office rumor. Just two people finding warmth in each other's company. And somewhere across the city, Elena stood by her window staring down at the same streets. For years she had carried the weight of responsibility, the silence of success. But now, for the first time, she felt something different, something simple and human. Neither of them knew where this connection would lead, but both knew one thing for sure. Sometimes the best things in life didn't come from plans or power. They came from the quiet moments between 2 cups of coffee, where hearts started to understand each other without saying much at all. Days turned into weeks, and the meetings between Ryan and Elena became more frequent. What started as short professional discussions slowly turned into longer conversations that drifted far away from work. It was never planned, it just happened naturally. Every time they spoke, they discovered something new about each other. Ryan found himself looking forward to seeing her name appear on his phone screen. Sometimes it was a short message about work, other times it was just something casual, like a funny quote or a picture of the coffee she was drinking. It always made his day feel lighter. Elena, on the other hand, had started to smile more often. Her assistant even noticed it. The woman who once rushed from meeting to meeting now paused to look out the window, sometimes lost in thought. It wasn't that her responsibilities had lessened. She still had the same mountain of decisions and deadlines. But for the first time in years, her days didn't feel empty. One evening, after a long day of meetings, she called Ryan. "Are you still at work?" she asked. "Unfortunately, yes," he said, rubbing his eyes. "My boss believes in the power of endless revisions." She laughed softly. "I know that feeling. I just finished with the board an hour ago." He hesitated before asking, "Have you had dinner?" "Not yet," she said. "Neither have I," he replied. "Want to make it less depressing and grab something simple?" There was a short pause. Then she said quietly, "That sounds nice." They met at a small Italian restaurant a few streets away. It wasn't fancy, just warm and welcoming, the kind of place where no one cared who you were. She wore a simple coat and had tied her hair back. For once, she didn't look like the CEO everyone feared. She looked like any other woman just trying to unwind. They ordered pasta and shared a bottle of water. It was quiet between them at first, but not awkward. The silence felt peaceful. After a while, Ryan said, "You know, I never imagined myself sitting across from someone like you." She smiled. "Why, because I'm the scary CEO?" He grinned. "A little. You have this strong presence, the kind that makes people sit up straighter." She laughed softly. "That's called survival. You learn it when people doubt you." "People still doubt you?" He asked. "All the time," she said. "Even after all these years, some still think I got lucky. Others think I'm too strict, too cold, too focused. But if I wasn't, Sterling Group wouldn't be standing today." Ryan nodded, understanding more than he expected. It must be hard to carry that every day. She looked at him, her expression softening. "It is, but I chose this path. What I didn't choose was how lonely it can get." Ryan listened quietly. There was something raw in her voice. something she probably didn't share with anyone else. He said gently, "Maybe you just need someone who reminds you that you're allowed to be human too." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than usual. "Maybe," she said softly. That dinner became a turning point. From that night on, they stopped pretending their connection was just about work. They began meeting outside of the office, sometimes for lunch, sometimes for evening walks. One rainy night, they found themselves walking under the same umbrella. The streets glistened with reflections of city lights and the smell of rain mixed with coffee from nearby shops. "You always seem calm," she said as they walked. "Even when things get stressful." Ryan chuckled. "That's because I'm quietly panicking inside," she smiled. "You hide it well." He looked at her and said, "You do too. But I think you hide a lot of things." Her steps slowed. "Maybe I do," she admitted. "When you spend years being the strong one, people forget you're also the tired one." He nodded. "Then maybe it's time someone helps carry some of that weight." She stopped walking. The sound of the rain filled the silence between them. She looked at him, not as a CEO, not as a leader, but as a woman who hadn't heard words that gentle in a long time. "Do you always talk like that?" she asked, half smiling. "Only when I mean it," he said. For a brief second, the world around them faded. Just two people standing close under one umbrella, both realizing that something was changing between them. From that day on, their friendship grew deeper. They laughed more, shared more, and slowly, without saying it, became a part of each other's lives. Ryan would sometimes surprise her with coffee during her long meetings. She'd leave small notes on his reports with comments like, "You think differently. Don't lose that." The people around them began to notice. Some whispered, others guessed. But neither of them cared much. What they had was quiet, natural, and unspoken. One evening after finishing a project together, Elena invited him to visit a charity event her company sponsored. "It's not a big thing," she said. "Just a small gathering for a cause I care about." Ryan agreed. That night he saw her in a new light. She moved through the room gracefully, speaking to people with warmth and kindness. She wasn't the cold executive people described. She was compassionate, humble, and deeply human. At one point she caught him watching her from across the room and smiled. It was a small moment, but it made something in him shift. He realized then that his feelings had grown deeper than friendship, but he also knew what kind of world she lived in. A world where every action was judged, every rumor exaggerated. He didn't want to risk her reputation, so he kept his feelings quiet. After the event, as they walked to their cars, she asked, "You were quiet tonight." He smiled. "Just trying not to embarrass you." She laughed. "You could never do that." Then more seriously, she added, "You don't have to be careful with me, Ryan. I trust you." Her words lingered in his heart long after she drove away. In the following weeks, the pressure around Sterling Group increased. The company was facing a new merger, and Elena had to deal with constant stress. Ryan saw the toll it took on her. One evening, he stopped by her office after everyone else had left. The lights were dim, and she was still working. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes tired. "Still at it?" he asked softly. She looked up, surprised but relieved to see him. "I can't stop now. The numbers have to be perfect." He walked closer and placed a cup of coffee on her desk. "You've been staring at that screen for hours. It won't change if you take a 5-minute break." She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "You sound like my conscience." "Maybe I am," he said with a grin. "And your conscience says you deserve rest." She took the coffee and smiled faintly. "You always know when to show up." He sat across from her. "Someone has to make sure you don't forget you're human." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes soft but unreadable. "You make that sound so easy." "It's not easy," he said quietly. "It's just worth it." For a few seconds, neither spoke. There was something in the air, an emotion that didn't need to be named. Eventually, she whispered, "You've become a part of my calm. You know that?" Ryan felt his chest tighten. He wanted to tell her that she had become a part of his too, but he just smiled and said, "Then I'll try not to cause any storms." That night, as he walked out of the building, the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement. He realized he wasn't just walking away from work. He was walking deeper into something he couldn't stop anymore. And in her office, Elena sat in silence, her hand resting on the coffee cup he'd brought. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about the next deal, the next meeting, or the next goal. She was thinking about him, The man who showed up not to impress her but to remind her that even strong hearts need softness. Whatever was happening between them was no longer just chance. It was something real. Something growing quietly between coffee cups, laughter, and shared silences. Neither of them said it out loud yet, but both knew the truth, that their hearts were slowly learning to speak the same language. The weeks that followed brought a strange change in the air. What had once been quiet admiration between Ryan and Elena began to attract attention. It started with small things. Curious glances from colleagues, whispers in hallways, a few raised eyebrows when they left meetings together. Neither of them paid much attention at first. They were just two people who understood each other. But soon, even small gestures, like her smiling when he entered a room, or him waiting to walk her out, started to become topics for office gossip. In a place like Sterling Group, rumors grew fast. One morning, Ryan arrived early for a meeting and could already feel the tension. Two employees were standing by the coffee machine, whispering. When they noticed him, they fell silent, pretending to be busy. He didn't say anything, but the message was clear. People were talking. Later that day, during a meeting with another department, one of the senior managers made a comment disguised as a joke. "Seems like our CEO's found herself a favorite advisor these days," he said with a smirk. The room laughed quietly, but Ryan felt his stomach twist. He looked at Elena, but she didn't react. Her face remained calm, her expression unreadable. She simply moved on with the discussion as if nothing had been said. After the meeting, she called him into her office. The moment the door closed, her calm mask slipped a little. "I'm sorry about that," she said quietly. "People can be thoughtless sometimes." Ryan shrugged. "It's fine. I know how offices work." "No, it's not fine," she said firmly. "You don't deserve that kind of talk." He looked at her, noticing the tiredness in her eyes. "Neither do you," he said softly. She sighed and sat down. "This company has always been my life, but sometimes I think it's also my cage. People expect me to be perfect, untouchable. The moment they see something human and a smile, a friendship, they start to question it." He leaned against the desk. "Then let them talk. We know the truth." She looked up at him, her voice quiet. "The truth doesn't always matter in this world." The next few days were difficult. The air in the office grew colder. Some employees avoided eye contact with Ryan, while others acted overly polite, as if testing boundaries. He tried to ignore it, but he could feel the distance forming. Even Elena started keeping things more formal in front of others. It wasn't her fault. She had to protect her position, her reputation. But Ryan couldn't help feeling that something between them was slipping away. One evening, he stayed late to finish a project. The building was quiet, lights dimmed, only the soft hum of air conditioning filling the silence. As he was packing up, he heard her voice from the hallway. "You're still here?" He turned. She stood by the door, holding a folder, her coat draped over her arm. "Yeah," he said, "just finishing up." She walked in and placed the folder on the desk. "You shouldn't stay this late. You'll burn out." He smiled faintly. "Coming from you, that's ironic." That made her laugh, the first real laugh he'd heard from her in days. "Touché," she said. Then the laughter faded, replaced by something heavier. "I heard some things today," she said quietly. "About you, about us." He didn't ask what. He already knew. "I tried to stop it," she continued. "But gossip has its own speed. I just wanted you to know. If this ever affects you, I'll understand if you want to step away from the project." He stared at her. "Step away? Is that what you want?" "No," she said quickly. "It's the last thing I want. But I can't stand the idea of your career being hurt because of me." He walked closer. "Elena, I don't care what they say. I'm not here because of what people think. I'm here because I want to be." Her eyes softened. "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," he said quietly. "I don't see you as the CEO or the headlines or the gossip. I just see you, the person who works too hard, who forgets to eat lunch, who's human like everyone else." Her voice trembled slightly. "You shouldn't make it so easy for me to feel something." "Ryan," he looked at her for a long second before saying, "Maybe you just forgot what it's like to be seen." Silence hung between them, filled with everything they couldn't say aloud. She turned her head slightly, as if afraid her expression might give her away. Eventually, she said softly, "We both need some space. At least for now." He nodded slowly. "If that's what you need." She gave a weak smile. It's what's best for now. After that night, things changed. Their emails became shorter, their calls less frequent. Meetings turned strictly professional. And even though both tried to act normal, something in their hearts ached quietly. Ryan threw himself into work, trying not to think too much. But every time he passed the cafe where they'd first met, he couldn't stop himself from glancing inside. She wasn't there. Weeks later, an announcement was made that Sterling Group would undergo a major merger. It was the company's biggest deal yet, and all eyes were on Elena. The pressure was enormous. Ryan watched from a distance, proud, but also worried. She looked more tired than ever. One night, after a long day of meetings, he got a message from her. "Are you still at the office?" He replied, "Yes, you too?" Her response came quickly, "I can't seem to leave. Everything feels heavier than usual." He didn't think twice. He grabbed his coat and walked straight to her building. When he arrived, the night guard let him in. They all knew him by now. He found her in the conference room, staring at a wall of charts. She looked up, surprised but not unhappy to see him. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I could say the same to you," he replied. He walked over, stood beside her, and looked at the endless numbers on the screen. "You're doing too much again," he said gently. "I don't have a choice," she whispered. "If this merger fails, hundreds of jobs are at risk." He turned to her. "And what about you? Don't you matter too?" She looked at him, and for a moment, all the walls she had built began to fall. "You always make me question the way I live," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." She exhaled deeply, then said something she hadn't said before. "I thought keeping distance would make things easier. But it hasn't, it's only made everything harder." Ryan's voice softened. "Then stop trying to protect an image that doesn't care about you. You've spent your whole life protecting everyone else. When's it your turn?" Her eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I wish things were simpler," she whispered. "Maybe they don't have to be complicated," he said. "Maybe all it takes is one honest choice." The room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside. She looked at him for a long time, then said, "You should go home before I forget how to think clearly." He smiled sadly. "All right, but don't stay too late." As he turned to leave, she called after him softly, "Ryan." He stopped. She hesitated, then said, "Thank you for reminding me what kindness feels like." He nodded, holding her gaze for one last moment before walking away. That night, Elena sat alone in the quiet conference room thinking about everything. The success, the loneliness, the way one unexpected person had managed to slip past all her walls. She realized that in a world full of ambition and control, he had given her something far rarer, honesty. And miles away, Ryan lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. No matter how hard he tried to pull away, his heart had already chosen her. The rumors, the distance, the uncertainty, none of it could erase what had already begun between them. It was quiet, fragile, but real. And deep down, both of them knew that their story wasn't over yet. It was only waiting for its next chapter, the moment when they would finally stop running from what was already theirs. Days turned into weeks, and the merger took over everything. Meetings stretched late into the night. Reporters camped outside the building, and every move Elena made was watched closely. The world saw a strong, confident CEO leading her company into a new era. But behind those headlines was a woman who hadn't slept properly in weeks, who stared out her window late at night and wondered what she had lost along the way. Ryan had tried to keep his distance, just like she wanted. But it wasn't easy. Every time he saw her on the news giving another calm, perfect statement, he could tell how much she was holding in. The sparkle in her eyes was gone. She smiled for cameras, but not like she used to. He told himself to stay away. He told himself it wasn't his place. But one Friday evening, after another long day, he got a message from someone in accounting, the kind of quiet rumor that spreads through offices like smoke. They said the board was considering replacing her after the merger, worried that she was too emotionally involved in some recent decisions. Ryan didn't believe it at first. But when he heard she hadn't shown up to her next scheduled press meeting, his heart sank. He didn't think. He just ran. When he reached her office, the floor was empty. The lights were dimmed, and only one faint glow came from her corner office. The door was open just enough for him to see her sitting there in the dark, head resting against her chair, papers scattered across the floor. He knocked softly on the door frame. "Elena?" She looked up slowly. Her eyes were tired, red from holding back tears. For a second she seemed surprised to see him. Then she gave a faint, sad smile. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I heard what's happening," he said gently. "Tell me it's not true," she sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It doesn't matter what's true anymore. They've made up their minds. The merger went through, but they think I've become a liability. Too emotional, they said. Not objective enough to lead." He felt anger rise inside him. "After everything you've done for this company?" "That's ridiculous," she gave a small, broken laugh. "This world doesn't care about loyalty. It only cares about control." He walked closer, picking up one of the papers from the floor, a list of board members' meeting notes and resignation drafts. "You're not really going to let them push you out, are you?" She didn't answer. She just stared out the window at the city lights below. "Maybe it's time," she said softly. "Maybe I've been fighting for something that stopped being mine a long time ago." He looked at her for a long moment. "You built this place," he said quietly. "You turned it into something people believed in. And now when they're ready to enjoy the success, they want to erase you from it." Her eyes met his, and for a second, the distance between them vanished. "Why do you still care so much?" She whispered. "You don't owe me anything." He shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not here because I owe you. I'm here because I care about you. Not the CEO, not the headlines. You." She looked down, her fingers trembling slightly. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said quietly. "It'll only make it harder." He smiled faintly. "It's already hard. Pretending I don't feel something doesn't make it go away." For a long time, she didn't speak. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. Then she finally said, "When I first met you in that cafe, I thought you were just another friendly face. Someone who'd come and go. But you saw through me before I even realized it. You made me remember what it felt like to be seen, not just respected." Ryan stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. "You deserve to be seen that way every day." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You have no idea how much I've wanted to hear that. But I can't let myself depend on someone. That's what got me here, caring too much." He shook his head. "No. What got you here is being human in a world that punishes emotion. But maybe that's exactly what the world needs. Someone who leads with heart." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. It was small, almost shy, but real. "You always know what to say, don't you?" "Not always," he said quietly. "But when it comes to you, I mean every word." She stood up slowly, walking toward the window. The city lights reflected against the glass, wrapping her in a soft glow. "What am I supposed to do now, Ryan? I've spent my entire life building this company. If I walk away, who am I then?" He joined her by the window. "You're still the same person who built it. The same person who inspired hundreds of people to do better. You just don't have to do it alone anymore." She turned her head slightly toward him. "And what about you? What will you do if I leave?" He smiled faintly. "I'll keep doing what I do best, showing up when it matters." She let out a quiet laugh, the kind that comes from exhaustion, but also relief. "You really mean that, don't you?" He nodded. "I do." For a while, they just stood there side by side, watching the city below. Two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. A few days later, the board meeting took place. Ryan wasn't allowed inside, but he waited downstairs, pacing in the lobby like a man waiting for a verdict. Hours passed. When the elevator finally opened, Elena stepped out, her expression calm but unreadable. "Well?" he asked, his heart pounding. She paused for a moment before answering. "I resigned." The words hit him harder than he expected. "You, what?" "I could have fought them," she said quietly. "But it would have been endless. They've already decided what they want. And honestly, I think I've been fighting too long. Maybe it's time to breathe again." He looked at her, at the peace slowly returning to her face, the freedom hidden in her tired smile. And for the first time, he realized she wasn't breaking. She was finally letting go. "What will you do now?" he asked. She took a deep breath. "I don't know. Maybe travel. Maybe start something smaller. Something that feels real again." Ryan nodded. Then maybe that's the best decision you've ever made. She looked at him, her voice gentle. You know, I wouldn't have had the courage to do this if it weren't for you. He smiled. You didn't need me for courage. You already had it. You just needed someone to remind you. They walked out of the building together, the night air cool and quiet. For the first time, there were no cameras, no flashing lights, no board members watching. Just two people walking side by side, free from everything that had weighed them down. As they reached the street, she stopped and looked at him. Ryan, she said softly, do you ever wonder why life brings certain people into your path? He smiled, all the time. And what do you think? She asked. He thought for a moment before replying. I think sometimes it's to remind us what we've been missing. And sometimes it's to help us find where we're meant to go. She looked at him for a long moment. Then I guess you were both for me. The words hung in the air, gentle, honest, and full of meaning. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and held her hand. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. The city lights shimmered around them. And for a brief, quiet moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped to breathe. In the weeks that followed, Elena kept her promise. She left the corporate world behind, taking time to rediscover herself. She traveled, read books she hadn't touched in years, sat in cafes without a schedule to follow. And sometimes, when Ryan could get away from work, he joined her. No titles, no deadlines, no expectations. Just laughter, late-night talks, and the kind of peace neither of them had felt in years. They didn't call it love right away. It wasn't about labels or grand confessions. It was about small things. The way she'd rest her head on his shoulder when the world felt heavy, or the way he'd make her coffee just how she liked it, remembering every detail without being asked. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There were still doubts, still days when she missed her old life and moments when he wondered if he belonged in hers. But they faced those things together, not as CEO and employee, but as two people who had found something rare in a world too busy to notice. And one quiet morning, months later, they returned to the same cafe where it all began. She looked at him across the table and said with a smile, You know, I came here years ago just to get coffee. And now look where that led me. Ryan laughed softly. Guess some coffee runs change your whole life. She reached across the table, took his hand and said, No, you changed mine. He looked at her, his heart full. Then I guess we both got what we needed. Outside, the world moved as always, busy, loud, and endless. But inside that little cafe, everything was still. Two hearts that had found their way through noise, fear, and chaos finally found peace. And maybe in that moment that was enough.